I was Labor's poster child. I knew that this would be the beginning of a very long journey. Fatima, just think about in a few years' time, you could potentially be a minister. I knew what my mission was. Deep down, I knew that there was something more I could do, and that was go against party lines. They didn't want my voice to be heard. And you're there to serve the people, not your party. But just because Labor was in government and the genocide took place under their noses and they didn't do anything about it. Shut up, do as I'm told, and blend into the background of the Labor Party.
The Australian government has announced a general election. Its Labor government has grown tired in office and, particularly important for Muslims, has colluded to enable a genocide in Gaza. In both the UK and America, Muslims and conscientious voters worked together to hold the government to account for what has been the worst crime in decades. Will Australia's Muslim community build upon its newfound resilience and unity and work with allies to punish those responsible for Gaza at the ballot box? Today we have a very special guest. Senator Fatima Payman is a senator in the Australian Upper House for Western Australia. In June 2024, she was the first in her party since 1998 to cross the floor over a vote on Palestine statehood. By July, she resigned over the government's policy on genocide, having been suspended by Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. Although Fatima is not up for re-election this time, these coming elections may be another extremely important test for Muslims in the West and their commitment to their ummah and commitment to justice. Senator Fatima Payman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome to the Thinking Muslim.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's wonderful to have you with us. I know that you're in the midst of a general election there. You've got, 25 days left at the time of speaking before your election takes place. And it's been a frenetic time, I suppose, for you and many of the pro-Palestinian candidates in Australia. Now, I want to really understand this past 16, 17 months, what you faced as a candidate that took a stand on Palestine, but also how you feel that the Muslim vote, let's say, or the pro-Palestine vote will fare in this coming election. But can I start with that day in June when you crossed the floor with the Greens to vote against your party, or for a motion that your party was against, a pro-Palestine motion that your party was against? I think it was the first time since the late 80s that someone in your previous party, in the Labour Party, crossed the floor. Just tell me about that day, please.
It was a very nerve-wracking day. I woke up, went into the Senate as per normal, and there were talks, anticipation of what is Fatima Payman going to do. We had just come from a few weeks off the Senate proceedings, so everyone was, rumor was that I may cross the floor, and the pressure was mounting from both sides. I had colleagues who would, the pseudo empathy they would show. They would ask me out for a coffee, or they would take me for a walk and say things like, Fatima, just think about in a few years' time, you could potentially be a minister and you would have so much power to do so much more, and continue representing the community. So, don't fall for the green stunt. They're trying to wedge us. They're trying to bring division. To which I would go back and say, but it's in our party platform. Like the Palestinian statehood, and recognizing that statehood is something that we've got in our party platform. Like, I was still grappling with the fact that the caucus was making decisions that did not reflect what your rank and file members wanted. And subhanAllah, it was this constant back and forth. And I remember the whip in the Senate, so the Labor whip, coming to my office and saying, what decision have you made? Are you going to cross? Because our suggestion is for you to abstain. Like, you don't have to come to the Senate chamber when this vote's happening. Just don't rock up. Well, and that's okay. You won't get in trouble. And I think they were struggling to understand that this was a matter of principle and a matter of conscience. And I remember telling them, look, this is a decision that's beyond me, and I'm seeking God's guidance. Which later on you would have seen made the headlines, and newspaper articles came out to say, oh, Senator Payman's waiting for God's guidance, or she's bringing sectarianism into politics. But yes, subhanAllah, like, as the votes were happening, and to your Australian viewers, they may have seen that moment. There were a lot of votes and amendments that were taking place. And as somebody who was completely new to the procedural side of the Senate, because when you're part of a party, you enter the chamber and you just follow your whip. The whip tells you sit on one side or sit on the other side. You do as you're told, so you're not actually exercising that autonomy to figure out, okay, what's really going on? What are the different steps to get to voting for a motion? And so I was sat in the advisor's box next to David Pocock's chief of staff, Fiona, and she was sort of assuring me, she's like, do you know what you're doing in terms of what decision you're making? How you feeling? It's okay. Do you want David to walk with you? And I, like, it's this moment of feeling absolutely out of body experience where I knew my mission. I knew what my mission was, and I wasn't going to allow anybody to come in between me and that mission. And subhanAllah, when the question was put, should the Senate recognize the state of Palestine? It was a no-brainer, but it was, my heart was literally in my throat. I knew that this would be the beginning of a very long journey that I have no blueprint or roadmap for, but I trust Allah to guide me through it. And yeah, subhanAllah, taking every step to cross the floor and hearing the gasps and the whispers and, oh my God, she really did it. Like, oh, from my colleagues on the other side. There was something empowering about it, but also just the unknown. We're always afraid of what's to come afterwards. So, subhanAllah, the best decision of my life, and definitely no regrets.
On behalf of Baitulmaal Foundation, we are pleased to welcome you all to this blessed communal iftar that brings us together today. We wish you a pleasant iftar and an evening filled with joy and happiness.
من زمان ما تلمينا اللمة الحلوة وجمعية بيت المال لمتنا وشكرا لهم. شكرا بيت المال.
شكرا بيت المال على السعادة اللي أعطونا إياها.
شكرا مؤسسة بيت المال، بكل عام وأنتم بخير.
I remember in June, we were in the midst of a general election here, and we heard the story of you crossing the floor, and it was really empowering for us. I mean, I think we felt a certain sort of connection with you because of just how strongly the Muslim community in Britain were feeling about Palestine and our Labour politicians. I mean, we have our Labour Party here. Very many, if not most of the Muslims in the Labour Party were very reticent to even talk about Palestine or make a comment about Palestine. Now, I know before that day, you were accused by some members of the Muslim community, maybe uncharitably, for not talking up for Palestine. And there were lots of accusations against you as a member of the Labour Party and someone who had obeyed the whip for such a long time. I mean, just tell me about some of the pressures you faced leading up to that June vote.
Pressure was insane. I think from November 23 onwards, the community had expectations. I mean, I'm not the first Muslim politician in Australian federal parliament, but I was visibly Muslim. And I think that increased the expectation of the community and the broader Australian society, because I mean, we saw the student encampments as well. It was our young students, and being the youngest parliamentarian, being a visibly Muslim woman, I think there were various cohorts of our society looking to me saying, why aren't you doing more? Why aren't you pushing the Labor Party? As if I could single-handedly change the entire party, or when I say party, the entire caucus's perspective and decisions. I think people did not completely understand the mechanisms and what took place behind closed doors. And I don't blame them, but I think the pressure, not just on me, but on my husband, on my family, people attacking my siblings online, people bullying my little cousins at school, just because they shared the same surname. It was very vitriolic at times, where it felt like, you know, damned if you do, damned if you don't. And I had been thus the only Labor MP or senator who had been so vocal. Like, I'd attended rallies. Yes, I was absolutely berated, and people would shame me for being part of the Labor Party or my leadership back then that weren't taking strong action. And I had to endure all that. I had to just bear the brunt. I had to face it and say, I know you're mad. I know you're upset. I know you're frustrated. I'm doing my best as one person, but I need you to keep pushing. And I'll try to explain and say, guys, I'm trying to do everything within my capacity to push internally. But it just felt like it was never enough. And it wasn't until the migraine attack started, I was put on blood pressure medication after 3 hospitalizations, that I was like, what am I trying to fight here? Because deep down, I knew that there was something more I could do, and that was go against party lines. I didn't have to toe the line. Yes, it could mean my expulsion. It could mean the party would kick me out and I'll be ostracized. But is that the cost I'm willing, or the price I'm willing to pay? Is that something that I will take on my shoulders and say, you know what? Like, if it comes down to principles, I'm willing to pay the price and you know, go against my party lines. But it was, until then, I'd exhausted everything, whether it was talking to Penny Wong, our foreign minister, whether it was begging my caucus. So my left caucus, I was in the left faction of the Labor Party, and telling them things like, look, if you don't see the human cost and the human tragedy of all this, at least see the fact that we're bleeding votes. Members are leaving our party in droves. Like, and this is no longer just a Muslim issue. Like, we are getting broader support from a massive cross-section of society. Like, we need to wake up. We've got elections coming up. And they would tell me things like, we won't allow the community, whatever that meant, to blackmail us. You know, we know that when the time comes to it, they will forgive and forget. And it's almost like this was a tried method. Like, they knew exactly what to expect, that the community was so predictable and it's happened so many times before, that they have gotten away with literally murder or supporting murder. And we have just fallen back to the Labor Party because of the whole fear campaign of, oh, it's the lesser of two evils, or, you know, you can't risk going backwards and it will be far worse for us to have a Liberal government, and really impressing on people's fear of the other side. Even though it's like the Labor Party, you've literally done what Dutton wants. Like, you've you're far more closer to the Liberals than you have ever been in various positions, not just Palestine. I think our immigration policies, our offshore detention policies, the way we've handled ourselves in foreign affairs matters, like even domestically, like our housing policy and environment policy isn't as strong as Labor members would like to see Labor push for.
Now, you mentioned in a speech, I think it was, that you turned from being a poster child to a Machiavellian figure because of your position on Palestine. I mean, what did you mean by this?
So I was Labor's poster child in the sense that I ticked many boxes for them. I was young. I was born overseas. I'm visibly Muslim. I am a woman, and all these boxes that I ticked, they actually paraded me with pride. They would take me and send me over to different conferences, various delegations overseas, from Rwanda to Bahrain, Indonesia, Malaysia, South Korea, just to show the world, look at what we've elected. Look who's part of our government. But the way I put it is they had given me a seat, but they didn't give me a mic. They didn't want my voice to be heard. They didn't want a different perspective to be put on the table. As long as I sounded like them but looked different, to have a broader appeal to communities that they felt disengaged from, they would have my back and they would support me. But the moment I choose my right to exercise, my autonomy and agency in thinking for myself and fighting for a cause that was very important to me, and that's justice for not just the Palestinians, but every other race and nationality and people out there, whether it's our First Nations people here in Australia, whether it's our immigrant populations, whether it's your everyday average Joe on the streets. Like, justice for all needs to be upheld. And I was shocked that wasn't something the Labor Party, it was just something that they would love to put in their platform, but not actually. When it came to practice, they would just discard it. But in that moment, when I turned from their poster child to this Machiavellian, evil plotter who was going to bring down the Labor Party or deliberately made these decisions to undermine the Labor Party, and they started backgrounding journalists and bringing my faith into this and making it sound like, I am going to bring Sharia law and I'm just this evil person that should be apprehended and just cast out. That's when I realized, and I've been going around telling people, especially our Muslim brothers and sisters who are still putting their hand up for the major parties, Labor and Liberal. I mean, they may be good people inherently, but how do you justify being part of a party that turned its back on the very essence of what it means to uphold human rights, equally? Like, we literally, if we did not have the example of Ukraine a few years earlier, we would not have been able to compare and say, you know what, same situation, except one side you're siding with the perpetrator instead of the victims, because of this so-called allyship. And it's put Labor in a position where I feel like they're digging themselves a deeper grave by the day, through their inaction, and it will cost them dearly this election.
So tell us about the Labour Party. What is it about the current leadership of the Labour Party and the way it functions in the sort of international system? What is it about the Labour Party and why it's so reticent to stand up for Palestinian rights? What is, has the Labour Party gone through a very similar transformation there in Australia there as it has here? And just explain, make a case against the Labour Party for me, please.
Upon Anthony Albanese's election, He is a member of the left faction of the Labour Party. He's one of the most progressive prime ministers Australia's ever seen. When I say progressive, I mean, looking at his track record, you would say he's super progressive. So winning the 2022 election, I think there was this sense of hope that every Australian out there had invested and had voted and wanted to see change. After 9 years of a coalition government, they were like, finally, we are going to fix the broken systems, whether it's immigration, whether it's healthcare, whether it's public sector, social services. We will finally fix all the broken systems that the coalition has, completely just brushed aside. You have the first year, honeymoon. It's usually called the honeymoon phase for a government. First year, smooth sailing. It was great. And it wasn't until, I guess, October 23 that Australia as a whole was shocked to see Anthony Albanese respond to the way he did. It was as if he was not utilizing his agency as a prime minister, who we've seen footage of chanting at Palestinian rallies, grabbing the megaphone and standing in solidarity. Like, he's a union guy through and through. He's a human rights guy through and through. But then come October 23 and it's like as if he's got a different script or talking points that are shoved in his face and he's forced to say it. Like, it was unfathomable. People were just not making that connection, saying, why is he behaving this way? What's going on? And it was a shock to me as well, personally, being part of the caucus, to be like, surely there's something I'm missing. Like, I was gaslighting myself, and I'm sure there are people out there gaslighting themselves, saying, maybe there's something I don't know about this prime minister. Maybe there's something happening behind closed doors that he's unable to tell us about. And so, his hands are tied or lips are sealed. And it was like, I think the turning point was when Zombie Franken, one of our own Australian aid workers, was killed, that I begged Penny and I was like, look, this is our opportunity. I hate to put it this way, but this is our opportunity to come out and say, Israel, this is a red line you've crossed, mate. Yes, you can be our friend, but this is a red line you've crossed, and we're going to call you out for it. And we're not going to just ask you to investigate yourself. That's another bizarre thing that I found. Instead of finding an independent arbitrator to really look into this matter, you just ask the perpetrator to investigate into themselves and their own war crimes. Like, that's absurd. But it was insane to see that development. No matter how many times rank and file members wrote to the Prime Minister and all Labor senators and MPs begging for us to do something, begging for us to take a stronger stance, it felt like they all fell on deaf ears. Nobody was taking them seriously. The movement became stronger when people started protesting outside offices. I would accept the delegations and invite them inside my office for a cup of tea, and I'd listen and I'd say, look, I may not be able to alleviate and make promises and be able to end all this, but what I can promise to do is carry your voices to Canberra, let my team know, let the caucus know, and press that this is important and we need to do something about it. Whereas my other colleagues would just close their doors and not allow these people to come in, despite my attempts to just message our group chat saying, guys, just let them in. They just want to be heard. Just allow them to come in, share their stories. Because it was heartbreaking to hear constituents sit opposite me and say, I went to a mobile office of one of your Labor colleagues and I told him that I've lost 40 members of my family in Gaza. Like, they were killed in an Israeli missile attack or airstrike. And she's like, that MP would turn around and say, do you live in my constituency? It's like, if she had said, my dog just died or my dog got run over, you'd at least have the courtesy to say, I'm so sorry for your loss. But the fact that it's to do with Palestine, Palestinian blood, and they go in this autopilot mode where it's like, I'm just going to repeat what I am told to repeat, with no empathy, with no human decency and courtesy, to at least acknowledge the pain and suffering of the communities here. And that's where the word social cohesion is such a trigger word for everybody, especially for the pro-Palestinian movement, because that's been used by the government, the Labour Party, and all the MPs to say, just be quiet. Just it's all right. You raising your voice and highlighting all the inequities and the double standards is impacting our social cohesion. The social fabric of this society is being disintegrated with you speaking your truth. So please be quiet. Don't say anything. And people started seeing through that. And it's been so empowering and uplifting for people like myself, where I felt ostracized. I felt like there was just no end to this. And to see just the grassroots community, everyday Australians joining the movement and saying enough is enough. Like, we're not going to allow the government to use our taxpayer dollars to fund a genocide and kill innocent people left, right, and center. It's been the overdue awakening that Australia needed. And it's sad that it came at such a high price. But I've never seen the community, the broader grassroots movement so activated. And, you know, the whole idea is to keep this momentum past 3rd of May, after our election, to make sure it doesn't just stop there. Whether it's students demanding more from their universities, or whether it's people attending protests and rallies, whether it's writing to their MPs, and whether it's, you know, putting their hand up for local council, state elections, and the 2028 federal election.
I have come across a number of UK-based Labour MPs, especially during the time of the election, who were, I'm sure, facing a very similar dilemma to yours. But very many of them, probably most of them, remained pretty wedded to the Labour Party and wedded to the whips. And they would say to me that we know that our party has fallen short on the genocide or on Palestine, but we can, as Labour politicians, as politicians that may be part of the next government, or at least members of the party that forms the next government, we may be able to do some good for our community. If we're outside of the party process, outside of the political party, the two-party system, we're not going to be able to do any good. And so they're weighing up, I suppose, the amount they can do for Palestine versus what they can do for the community. I mean, how do you assess that weighing up, that balancing that some of them, or that excuse maybe that some of them put forward?
I think it's a very weak excuse. It's them washing their hands off the responsibility as an elected official. When you're put in that position, you're there to serve the people, not your party. You're there to serve the constituency that got you there, even if it was under your party's banner. There is real good that comes out of the independence movement. And if independents are intelligent and smart, after the election, they would try to vote on block on many things. When you're negotiating and you hold the balance of power, you actually can do a lot of good for the community. Where you can put asks. I'll give you an example, and this would probably resonate to a lot of the Labour people, whether in the UK or here in Australia. When I had a go at Pauline Hanson in the chamber last year, Lydia Thorpe got suspended as a result of ripping a piece of paper and throwing it at Pauline. So Lydia was suspended, and therefore the government needed one extra vote. They needed one extra vote for the next day, which was the last day of sitting before our summer break. And it was the first time that the Prime Minister's office called me in after I had left the party in July. So I was quite surprised. I was like, oh, okay, this is unheard of. So I walk into his office with my chief of staff, who's a white old bloke in his 60s. And I was sat opposite the Prime Minister, but he did not make any eye contact with me at all whatsoever. And it was as if he was just talking to Glenn, my chief of staff, the whole time. And essentially, they needed our support to guillotine 40 bills in one day, which means cutting out debating time. Now, in the Senate, you need to get majority of the votes to be able to pass a motion like that. And they needed my vote because Lydia Thorpe was suspended. And so the Prime Minister offered the 2 additional staff that every other crossbencher gets at the discretion of the Prime Minister. And he was like, well, I'll give you your 2 additional staff. And I was like, with all due respect, Prime Minister, you cannot firstly hold that against my head. Like, I've got a right to have those staff. I know it's at your discretion, but it's not a negotiating chip. Secondly, I've managed 5 months without those 2 staff. Like, I can manage another few more. And thirdly, I was like, get rid of the migration amendment bills. These are draconian bills where you are subjecting thousands of genuine refugees and asylum seekers to not only continue their lives in limbo, but potentially have them deported to a third country because Australia just, can't house them anymore. And I was like, that's just inhumane. Like, we have a international humanitarian obligation to ensure that these asylum seekers who rocked up on our shores are protected and safe. And he was like, oh no, it's only going to impact a few hundreds. And I was like, we've heard from peak body organizations and experts that this is going to have broad ramifications across the board to thousands of people. And so I was like, I can't, if you get rid of that, then we have a deal. And he was like, no, I have a deal with the Liberals who are supporting these 3 migration amendment bills. And I was like, you're the Prime Minister. You can make it happen. You can just get rid of it. And to that, he was like, no, I can't do it. And I was like, fine, then no deal. And I walked out. But Glenn was following me back when the Prime Minister pulled him aside and said, you're the adult in the room. Go convince her. Like, it's absolutely not only misogynistic, but the way he is so out of touch with his own party platform. Like, I had to sit there opposite him to be like, this isn't what your members want. This isn't what your rank and file members asked for when they elected you. Like, how have you totally forgotten about them? But it's insane to see that Labor politicians, whether here in Australia or the UK, try to use the same line of line of reasoning to say there's more benefit or there's a better opportunity for us to serve our community by being in the Labor Party than being outside. Like, if I had an additional person voting that day, the Prime Minister would have done whatever he could to come to that agreement and get rid of those migration amendment bills. But because he could then go to David Pocock and try to convince him to get his vote, he sort of didn't really put much weight. But if David and I had, come together and voted as a block and say, you know what, it's both of us or none of us, then we would have received some solid outcomes. But again, it requires crossbench senators and MPs to be politically savvy and to see the long-term vision, to not just think about their political longevity and expediency, but actually what's the greater goal here.
So if I understand the political system right, I mean, you've got a system there which where for the last few election cycles there have been either very slim majority governments or minority governments that required coalitions or some form of agreement with crossbenchers in order for government to undertake its business. And so the argument is that in this coming election, the more the Australian public vote in candidates from parties and independents beyond the two main parties, the more ability there is for the general Australian citizenry to have an impact on accounting the political parties, but also making the right decisions when it comes to things like migration and Palestine and social issues that you campaign for. So your argument is that there needs to be a tapestry of candidates that come together post-election and work as one block. I mean, how likely is that? I've seen in some instances here in the UK when we had this, sort of rainbow tapestry of different parties and independents. Sometimes it's very difficult to herd them together and to work together. I mean, is there work taking place to make sure those independents in Sydney and elsewhere are going to actually work under one general umbrella?
I think for MPs and senators to work in parallels is a possibility, but getting senators in the crossbench to work together may be challenging because, again, everyone has their vested interests. But I think cross-chamber, we can definitely get some good done and be able to work in parallels. I know that our democracy is fairly young, but we can strengthen it by having the variety of independents and minor parties representing Australians, because that way they can actually hold them to account. The fact that major parties want, say, Labor senators from Western Australia to vote the same way as Labor senators in Victoria, where these two states are completely different, worlds apart, different priorities, different demographics. It doesn't make sense that both those senators, instead of representing their states, they're representing the party. And I think it needs to come down to genuine, true representation, whether it's in the House of Reps or in the Senate, for voters to actually know, all right, we lent this lower house MP who's independent our vote in the 2025 election. If we see that over the next 3 years they have not represented us or haven't done a good enough job, by 2028 you can take that vote off them and give it to someone else. Like, the power lies with voters, with everyday Australians. And that's what we've had to drive home. The major parties are two sides of the same coin, just the way we don't like our Woolies and Coles duopoly, the supermarkets that, price gouge and really do consumers dirty. We're starting to see that replicated in our political system with the major parties, Labor and Liberal. They only have each other's backs. I mean, the most recent electoral reforms indicated that they only care about themselves. There's something called a resettlement allowance, where an MP or a senator that get kicked out of their position, right? Like, if you think that your lower house MP has not represented you and you kick them out, they will be secured with a fat payout of $120,000 with 3 return flights to Canberra. And those flights to Canberra is for them to buddy up, cozy up to their buddies and ask them to line up their next gig, and the $120,000, when there's a cost of living crisis and the government keeps saying we don't have enough money to alleviate your stresses, but we have enough money to clearly keep our pockets lined up full of cash. It's just where are the priorities? And I put a motion in the Senate to say, let's get rid of this rule. The Labor Party, the Liberals, and Pauline Hanson's One Nation voted to keep that. They voted against my amendment, and they were like, no, we're going to keep that resettlement allowance so that, it continues benefiting when we lose our seats. So it's like, at the end of the day, you're not there to serve your people. When your social services are crumbling or your job seeker payments are literally increased by $1 or $2 per week, and here you are giving yourself massive pay rises and resettlement allowances. Like, it's our leadership is absolutely warped, and we need to change that. It's a very bottom down approach, top down approach, where it's we up on top will tell you how to live your life down bottom, whereas it's supposed to be those on the ground who are struggling and suffering need to be able to contribute to the policies that will hopefully have a real impact on their lives.
So we have elections coming up, as I said, 25 days to election day. What advice are you giving to conscientious voters, to Muslim voters, pro-Palestine voters? The electoral system is quite complex in Australia, and there's a preferential system where they've got to rate candidates. So what guidance is issued to the ordinary voter that shares your politics, so that they can vote in a conscientious way?
Look, I don't know every seat out there, but all I know is that when it comes to the lower house candidates, whether it's Greens or independents, if you don't have a strong independent voice in your electorate, go next best to the Greens. And if you don't have them, then fine. If you have to, you'll vote for Labor. But in the upper house, which is the Senate, you've got a real opportunity to help us as Australia's voice hold the government to account. A party that wants to make a difference, yes, but it's the fact that we have come about at a time when both the major parties have let voters down. This is our real opportunity to make a difference, to hold the government of the day to account. So in the upper house, you've got a long ballot paper, and you'll have all the parties' names on it. You will need to vote 1 to 6. Again, it's super simple when you see all the parties' names and little boxes on top. But our advice is to help us keep them to account. You can vote for Australia's voice, then vote for other minor parties before you even reach the major parties. The major parties have had it too good for too long, and they clearly haven't understood through the rallies, through the encampments, through the mass email campaigns. The only way they will really understand how massively they've messed up in being complicit in this genocide, but also not alleviating any of Australians' stresses when it comes to the housing crisis or the cost of living crisis. In order for them to get the message, they need to experience electoral loss. And that electoral loss is going to take place on 3rd of May, inshallah, when they realize that sitting on the wrong side of history is going to cost them, and this is how it's going to cost them, rather than continuing on this trajectory of the community will forgive and forget, and resorting back to their old ways. This is a real opportunity, and I have faith that our Australian population has really woken up, and they want to see that change. They want to see that difference made on 3rd of May. So inshallah, we can chat afterwards to see what the outcomes were. But nonetheless, even if we don't necessarily unseat Labor strongholds, we will marginalize them enough for them to get the message. This time we've marginalized you. Next time we're coming for you. And that goes to both Labor and the Liberals. But just because Labor was in government and the genocide took place under their noses and they didn't do anything about it.
One final question for you, Senator Fatima Payman. You've, I know this past year and a half has had a toll on you personally, and the media has vilified you. They've called you Hamas supporter and someone who's guided by God and the rest of it. You've had many members of the right attack you for your stance on Palestine, suggesting that you're not working for Australia's interests and you're working for foreigners and you've had it's been a very stressful time, I can imagine. I suppose my question for you was is that and of course any aspirations you may have had for government, for ministerial post to advance your careers, probably, dare I say it, shut down. I mean, your the two-party system will not give you access to that level of government ever again. I mean, was it worth it, Fatima?
It definitely was worth it. I never had ambitions of becoming a minister. I'm not a career politician. I was there in my capacity to serve, and I've always prayed that God uses me as a vessel to promote goodness wherever I go. So it's never felt like I've been at a loss. It has been tough. I know that it would have been a lot easier, like politically and career-wise, for me to just shut up, do as I'm told, and blend into the background of the Labor Party. It's a lot tougher to go off on your own, establish a party from scratch, all the infrastructure, all the stresses of having to run candidates, and give that option to every Australian nationwide in various states to be able to vote for someone different. So it is a lot of work, but as we believe, Allah never burdens a soul more than it can bear. And so I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. And I'm just thankful that, every step I've taken, I've done it with full autonomy and agency and with a clear conscience. I feel bad for, or rather, I feel sorry for my colleagues or former colleagues in the Labor Party who have to live with that guilt of not doing enough, of not truly representing their constituency. It's going to be tough, but I know that through the service and through the work I'm doing, if I'm able to shift even a percentage of people's minds and shed light on the Islamophobia we experience. In fact, we've been experiencing it on a daily basis, whether it's human feces that are sent in packages into the office or getting death threats, people mentioning various types of guns and how they're going to use that to assassinate me. You know that you're doing something right when this is how much commotion is spread based off my mere existence. But yeah, I just pray and hope that the grassroots movement does not lose momentum, and that we continue looking at the long-term vision of strengthening and establishing a base where we can have influence on our politicians, not just access. In fact, I've said this to many people inside or outside of our Muslim community, saying that don't be fooled by being able to call a minister or an MP and thinking you've got influence. Influence comes when people's actions reflect your wishes and demands, and these politicians are held truly to account. So I think there is a real opportunity. It's about harnessing it, growing and continuing to empower people. And yeah, inshallah, we put our effort in and leave the rest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the outcome lies with him.
Senator Fatima Payman, Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for your time. May Allah keep you safe and achieve the result that we're all wishing for in this coming election, inshallah.
Inshallah, Jazakallah khair.
When the genocide in Gaza began, I vowed we would never let those responsible get away with this. Silence was complicity in a world that wants us to remain placid, a world that wants us to be concerned more about our immediate lives and interests. The system buys our souls in return for acquiescence with their empire-building project. We at the Thinking Muslim set about changing the narrative, and in the process, with Allah's barakah, we galvanize our communities to confront these political elites and send them a clear message. In elections on both sides of the Atlantic, we brought communities together and led the way in countering their pernicious agenda. Such is the power of this new media. Our mission is simple. We want to build an alternative Muslim media, one that is rooted in faith, thinking, and enlightened activism. And we need your help to expand this sacred undertaking. Our plan is to turn the Thinking Muslim into a multi-show, multi-country media project. Please help us by becoming a member. For as little as £10 a month, you will have access to bonus shows, behind-the-scenes content, and Q&A with me and my guests. But most importantly, your contributions will make this voluntary project go to the next level and give you a share, inshallah ta'ala, in this reward. Now, I know the demands on our sadaqah are great. Please do consider becoming a member of the Thinking Muslim, or send us your one-off donations by going to thinkingmuslim.com/membership. Jazakallah khair, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from all of us. Please remember to subscribe to our social media and YouTube channels, and head over to our website thinkingmuslim.com to sign up to my weekly newsletter. Jazakallah khair.